Well, what's up, boys? Welcome back to another episode of Dogging It. Today, we're going to remember this day, I think, for quite a while in the pool world.
You know what I'm gonna remember is the fact that after all this time, you still can't get an unblurry camera because
Is it blurred?
Yes.
All right, I'll be
As
right
soon
back.
as we went live, it went blurry.
every single time, Mike, I swear it's so hard to find good help these days. Panozzo, how are you, buddy?
I'm good.
Putting in the overtime, Mike. It's
Oh,
must
you know
be
me.
must
I'm
be
always
important.
here, always at the office.
Well, while you were gone out on your vacation trip to Las Vegas, there was some dramas going on in the pool world, which we'll get to some of them today. I'm sure we'll get to some in the next few days. But meanwhile, let me bring in Ryan over here. That's your new name,
Is that
Ryan.
better?
Yes. Well,
Yeah, I got a support ticket in.
yes, but
I got a support ticket in
the blurry
to
wasn't all that bad now that I look back on it.
Yeah.
deal with this blurriness issue. I apologize for that, but man, I saw the press release. I know
I know.
it's all over the internet, and
It was
not
like,
really unexpected. I think we kind of thought it would go this way, but the reality of it's kind of hitting home right now. Like, there's going to be players that are going to have to make some really difficult decisions, and it's just a shame that their hand is being forced this way. I really feel for them. We know it's going to affect some players more than others, but geez, I mean, this is like worst case scenario, guys.
Hey, so before we get into the conversations and opinions, maybe Mike, you want to run us through, maybe for those who are tuning in that maybe don't know or who are watching this after the fact, as to what's going on.
well, the World Pool Billiard Association, WPA, um, met in Qatar and has been dealing with this issue of letting unsanctioned events rule the roost. And
Letting. It's an interesting word, letting.
well, they kind of, in the past year or so, they've been pretty since Matchroom told them this pound sand. Even before that, they, allowing players to play wherever they want to play was not that big a deal. It's just since, in the past couple of months that, not even WPA, but some of their continental federations, like the European federations, some of their national federations, the Asian Federation, started coming down hard on their federations and their players for non-sanctioned events. So this has been kind of simmering for a while, and over the weekend, the WPA came up with its blanket, determination for all its members, which now they must all follow, including the USA and BCA, is that any players who play in non-sanctioned events are not going to be able to play in WPA sanctioned events, or not going to be able to qualify for national events, represent their country, all this kind of blah blah.
So,
And then if they want to come back in to the WPA events, they will have to
pay up, son.
pay
Yeah,
$500 fine and then wait 6 months.
So you're in timeout for
So
6 months. Ship
yeah,
me the
so
500.
now you can't make a nickel for 6 months because you have to wait 6 months to play in a WPA event, which means in the meantime you obviously can't play in an unsanctioned event. So they're basically telling pool players, if you play in a Matchroom event, the minimum you're going to punish yourself is 6 months of not making a dime.
By the way, how strong is that last move by them? Just let me just throw that little cherry of 500 on top, along with waiting 6 months. Let alone the ban. We're just gonna sprinkle that last part in there, so that whenever you come to your senses, you know, the hand will be ready and willing to
yeah,
accept.
yeah.
So
I think the worst thing is telling them they can't play in an event for 6 months. Well, I
basically,
mean,
right? You can't earn
seriously,
a
you
living.
can't earn a
Well,
nickel for
let's
6 months.
clarify. We did have a little discussion about this off air. It's not every unsanctioned event. It's only events that are worthy of being WPA sanctioned that are not. Correct?
We think we're still it's still a little, because we don't know if the Texas Opens of the world or if the Midwest Classic is going to be included, or
Turning Stone, or
yeah, whichever one. It's very I guess it's very arbitrary then in that aspect, right? Or is there specific stipulations that have to be met in order for them to be able to put their hand out to get a piece of that pie?
I'd like to get clarification on that because, as we've talked about before, when European players come here, let's say they come here to play in the WPA sanctioned World 10 ball, while they're here, they would like to probably play in some regional events or those low level pro events and make a little bit of extra money while they're here. And just based on the wording of the press release, to me it sounds like that's not okay. But maybe you guys know more.
Mike?
No, I don't know. Well, I don't.
What do we got you on the show for?
Joey,
rephrase.
Can you rephrase, Joey?
Repeat the question.
Yes, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
I was reading something.
Yeah, I mean, we're joking, we're laughing about this. It's really not a laughing matter, though. It's really a sad day for pool. I mean, Josh just wins the tournament in Qatar. Obviously, he's not in Vietnam. It kind of speaks volumes about what Germany's trying to do, the German Federation, and maybe where Josh is leaning at this point in terms of his decision making. I don't know. What a shame that would be to not see him on the Matchroom stage.
Well, that by itself is kind of shitty. Just releasing that on the morning of when he wins a big event. Guy wins 50,000, beats Ko Ping Chung, who's coming off a big win at the U.S. Open, and it's gonna be an afterthought of today when you look at it, because all everyone's talking about is this announcement that happened to come at this time.
Guys, do you know anything about Nick's comment in here about the specifics of the votes? Panozzo, you talked the other day about certain federations getting more than one vote.
I asked their General Secretary, Jorgen Sandman, about the vote. All he would tell me was that it was not unanimous. So,
well, but we knew that because BCA was on the record saying that they would vote no. So that's not any news one way or the other.
Changed their mind. I don't know how many other people voted no, but the big power brokers got the votes that they needed to get it passed through the way they wanted it, and that's Europe and Asia. I mean, it's pretty simple.
So what does this mean for the players, or what do you think the players are going to end up choosing as far as their site? They got a few months to make that decision. I know that the wording in the press release states March, but Mike, you were saying that a lot of players renew with their federations at the beginning of the year. So if that's the case, players really have about 2 months to make a decision whether or not they choose to go the Matchroom route or they choose to go with their federations under the WPA.
Yeah, it's just a matter of there's some I believe that countries like Poland and Germany.
No, you said it right the first time, Mike.
Companies.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
That they signed an agreement, to be part of the national program, and as they get funded for that. So that way, if they bail out of the agreement halfway through the year, they have to pay the money back.
Right.
So, but I don't know what would happen. Like it's like in Poland, this doesn't take effect till March. So these players theoretically could play in Vietnam and also play in the World 8 ball and the World 10 ball because it's before March.
I'm going to stop you there because no, they can't. Not players like the Polish or some of these Asian players.
So now you're talking about national federations making their own decisions outside of the.
But the WPA is fully aware of that, and by their silence on the matter, just for me shows that they support those choices, right? Because they're not coming out one way or the other and saying, hey, let's give them till March like we are saying here.
Well, and again, they've said before, it's kind of, and we talked about this a little bit. It's kind of like, federal government and state government. The states can still, impose their own rules on certain things. So different countries might have tighter rules or tighter restrictions, or maybe more heavy-handed, and they may rationalize it saying that that's what's required of us by our national federation that gives us our funding, or whoever, whatever the case is. So you can't really. I think you could talk to the heads of the WPA, and I don't think they could tell you exactly what the Polish Federation's rules are. There's too many federations to know everybody's business, right? So, so that's going to be
That's
determined.
their job, though, isn't it, Mike? That's their
I don't know that I would expect a WPA boss to know what the Bosnia-Herzegovina National Federation rules are. I wouldn't expect that.
Yeah, they got enough on their plate as it is, right? Yeah. I don't know if I'm buying that, Mike, because to me that should be part of the equation. If I'm inviting you to a party, I want to know who I'm bringing over before I send out the invite, or I want to know what you're all about.
Well, there's certain rules that they have to live by as members, of course, but and they know those rules, but then those national federations are still allowed the flexibility of imposing their own rules and enforcing their own rules on their own players. So
I kind of think there's going to be a situation where you're going to have those players that maybe have a bit of a bankroll because they've had some success. And they're also in a position where if they travel to a Matchroom event, they have a really good chance of getting into that final 8 area where they can make decent money, final 4 area. And those players, I think, are going to choose Matchroom, right? But then you have maybe some of the younger players that aren't necessarily a lock to get to that final 16, final 8 in these events, and maybe they don't quite have a bankroll yet. And I don't know any of their personal finances, but it comes to mind, like if you think of the Polish contingent, like Maciol, he's a player that's kind of breaking onto the scene. We've enjoyed watching him in some Matchroom events. He's doing really well. I can't imagine he's in a position right now where he could do it without the federation's help.
I don't
Traveling
know
the
if any of the
world.
Polish players are, because they all, that federation is pretty ham-handed as far as telling their players what to do. So I mean, you saw.
But as
You
it
take a
stands,
guy, hold on. You take a guy like Victor. Okay,
right?
Victor could probably support himself playing pool, including expenses. He wouldn't be in as good a shape if he had to pay all of those expenses, but he is in a spot. And sometimes in life you got to take a chance. You got to take a chance. You got to go from a safe government job to a sales job because you're going to make commission and you believe in yourself. Kind of a similar situation here. Do we go the safe route and go WPA and get our expenses paid, or do we say, what, we're going for the top prize? We're going to be featured in all these Matchroom events and we're going to make money from that, and we can take a chance on ourselves.
Well, they're already doing that because in the Matchroom events, they're funding it on their own. Versus in WPA sanctioned events, they are getting support along with that. So where they're getting the help in those events. So that's already kind of happening as it stands right now. And then for whatever reason, they've just decided that Asia is completely off limits. Whatever influence that the ACBS has had over the Polish Federation has influenced that federation, and as a result, those players into saying, you can go anywhere else right now, you ain't going over there.
Yeah, that's interesting take.
Yep.
So some of the things that could come out of this, I'm thinking out loud here, so don't tear me up if this sounds terrible. But one of the things I was thinking is this an opportunity now for the industry to step up and the sponsors to ensure that their top players are able to attend the best events now in the world, which we all know right now are the Matchroom events, right? They get the most prestige, the most airtime, televised through parts of the world, live streamed through the rest, great production value. Is this an opportunity for the QTechs, for maybe even the Predators? I don't know. Or some of the other industry sponsors to say, what, we're going to take care of our players and we're going to make sure they get to these events and we got their back. Or are politics going to enter and we're going to see players who are being strong armed the other way to say, no, we're going to need to just stick with WPA events?
I think you're going to get it both ways. I mean, I don't know that the that the industry sponsors have the weight to start imposing their will on the ACBS and the Asian Federation, Federation, or the European Federation. Um, so I don't know how they would, what kind of embargo, whatever, what kind of moves they could make that would hurt those federations to the point where they would say we need to rethink this.
Without calling out any particular industry sponsor,
No, come
I'm
on,
just
Joe.
saying, hold on, we
Call them out.
know, we've seen it over and over that somebody's sponsored by company X or company Y, and it means they get like 4 Qs every 6 months and they could sell a few on an online auction. But
Yep.
like now, there's probably a need for real sponsorship
Yeah, there
to
is.
cover expenses and to cover,
Right.
some money for the players so that they can get to the top events, especially if they're going to be handcuffed now with this WPA ruling. So that's kind of my point there. Not that the industry sponsors will have influence over federations or anything like that, but maybe they say, hey, Victor, we know the Polish
But
Federation is heading this way, but we're going to throw our support behind you. We're going to help you get to these events. We want to see you on the Matchroom stage.
whether it makes a difference or not, they have a responsibility to the industry and the players as a whole to make a stand publicly. Whether or not it changes anything for them, for me, doesn't make a difference, right? If you're in the business of selling cues, but you want to sell me on this idea that you have the players' best interest in mind, then stand by it. Let it be you through and through. And so for me, I think you're going to start seeing more. I think you're going to start seeing a lot brands more vocal in some aspects, and then you're also going to have the ones who have been in bed or are aligned with the WPA continue to either be silent or just pretend like nothing's happening while everything's burning around them, like you've seen with other brands. But I'm not going to buy that. Like, I don't think they're going to make a difference. Even if you don't, at least come out and make an
Take a
effort.
stand.
Yeah, for sure. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? Either that, or to me, by that silence or by not saying anything, then to me you're saying, hey, listen, we agree with it and we support it, because there's no gray area here. Not for me.
Yeah.
I don't buy that for a second. And it's not. And these players, listen, whatever they may get, right? Because whether they're getting paid in product or they're getting paid in cash, or in some of their deals that we mentioned before, where they're getting paid into events along with that. Like, now that whole model changes if certain events go away, because now what I'm thinking I made each year is not going to be available to me if those events aren't going to be around. And then on the other side of it, then what, from the federation side of it, what events am I going to get support from uh, next year compared to what I would do if I'm going with Matchroom and I'm taking a stand all on my own and jumping in the water. So there's a lot of things that players have to weigh right now, and it's
Yeah.
real. And it couldn't come at a more, like, look, we talked about for years that, well, not we, but in general, how pool was just dead. It was never going anywhere. It was the same events every single year. Some big event would pop on the scene and be around for a little bit, then it would disappear. Then another one would come in its place, and then it would disappear. But there was never like any progress, not anything substantial or anything where you can have like legitimate hope on. And now when we had these two big players kind of come into the water, right? Now they can't work with one another, whether it's ego or difference in principles, whatever the case may be, right? WPA couldn't keep the peace between them at a minimum. And then not only that, but given how busy a calendar is, now you have the situation come where you're saying, okay, now because you've made us insignificant, we're going to go and swing our weight around here, and we're going to tell you that the players have a decision to make, and it's sad and unfortunate. Whatever adjective you want to use is accurate. But I also want to point out, like what Jeremy Jones said earlier, where I think it'll end up being a great day, when history looks back on it, because this could be a big turning point, and players need to realize like the importance of it. I feel like pool players in general just have this very immediate self-serving attitude where they're like, how can I get by this week? How can I get by right now? What gives me the best chance of making any money? But then on the other side, you have a guy like Shane, who is, if for me anyway, by choosing to not go to Qatar and going and playing in Vietnam, and by him coming out vocally and saying I'm with Matchroom, he's he's making public choices right now that are going to be beneficial to younger players for the next 10 plus years, I feel like. and I really believe that.
Well, he's
I
going to play in
mean,
the World 8 Ball, though, right?
Is he?
at
Yeah.
the same time, I mean, Shane is a unicorn in this. He's not your everyday pool player.
No, he's not.
He's a salaried player, from his sponsors, and he's not in the position that some of these other, especially European players, are. I mean, these decisions, like for Shane, this decision was super easy, I think. I'm not him, and we could have him on the show and ask him. I think it's a pretty easy decision for him because he's not counting on the support of a federation. But when you look at some of these Asian players and European players, this is going to be really tough. And guys, we see your comments, tons of them. We got over 250 people in here. This is awesome. Thanks for the comments. We can't reply to every one, but I am reading them, and we will shout them out when we see something to talk about. So keep them coming. So yeah, I mean, I think Shane's a different animal. I would be really, I'd feel a lot different if somebody from Poland stepped up and said, "Hey, I'm with Matchroom." Then I'm like, wow, that takes a lot of guts, like a Fortunski or someone just
But
like,
you
"Hey,
don't
I'm
know what
doing
those
it."
repercussions would be like, though. Like, it's not. I don't think it's as easy just to say like, "Wow, you're being brave." Like, you don't know what the consequences are for players like that, and that's
For
there's
Shane.
and
Well,
no, 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 no.
there's a couple players in Poland who are not in great stead with the um, federation, anyways. So a couple of them might well just say, I've been living fine without you. I'm going to go. You keep snubbing me on stuff, anyways.
Well,
So I'm not getting any of this federation money that you keep talking about. And really, when you get down to it, there's not that many countries that really put that much money into their players. But there's some of the key countries. Poland does a lot. Germany does a lot.
let's talk about
You get
Germany, Mike, because let's talk about a guy who's coming off back-to-back WPA wins and one Josh Filler, right? Picks up 50 in Qatar. I don't remember how much he picked up in China. I want to say like around 40-ish.
Yeah, 30,
Um,
40, something like that. Yeah.
yeah. So let's talk about him, Mike, because Alex had him on a video earlier today where he asked him, and it was kind of jokingly,
Playing
but
Waffle House on it.
the response to me, spoke volumes, Mike. Where he
Well,
said that we'll see what the future holds.
yeah, well, I think, I know where my money is on Josh, and that's WPA, because he's got the German Federation. He's got, he played in China and won. He played in Qatar and won, and he pulled out of Vietnam. So I don't know. I don't know how much. I guarantee he's going to be playing the World 8 Ball Championship. So I don't know how much more you need to kind of lead you to think that he's that his writing's already on the wall, and whether
If
it's
if his
his decision could be federation based, it could be personal based, it could be predator based. Who
Uh,
knows?
does Pia being a professional player factor into that? Because the women don't necessarily have the opportunity to play Matchroom. They can play some
You
Matchroom
can
events, but
factor
they're
into
not
it, yeah, because
cashing and making big money in
they
those.
like going to events together. There are some events that they can go to together, the World Championships, things like that. And what Jim says is right. The German Federation 100% behind the WPA. They always have been. Poland will be too. But I don't think that means that every German player has fallen in lockstep with the Federation.
no,
I'm going to
look at
be
a guy like
really
Ralph
surprised
Everett,
to see
Mike.
where Moritz ends up in this. Um, you know, so
Look at the European Mosconi Cup captain. He's also the German national coach.
Hey,
You
Josh
know,
Glancy had a comment in the chat here, just asking the implications for Mosconi Cup. Or is that a part? Would that be a part of
well,
this
let's see.
ban?
If you're not playing in Hanoi and you haven't qualified already, it's not breaking news to say that Josh Filler will not be an automatic pick for this year's Mosconi Cup. So then you got to think, okay, will he be a captain's choice? Like I mentioned a little bit ago, Ralph is part of is the coach for the German national team. But how's that going to look if you're skipping matchroom events heading into decision time, right? It's not gonna do you any favors. So
I'm thinking more about the following year. A player plays in a Matchroom event. Is that an event that WPA would have an issue with them playing it?
Mosconi Cup.
Yeah. I know the press release says events eligible for WPA sanctioning, and I don't think Mosconi Cup would fit in that category, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I hadn't thought about. I think the Mosconi Cup used to actually be sanctioned. But
It used to be.
but I would imagine that they will lump that in there with their unsanctioned. And plus, you can't play for Mosconi Cup unless you qualify through their system. Even as captain's picks, you're not going to play in WPA events all year and be considered a captain's pick.
Nope, it'll never happen. It'll never happen.
Couldn't happen.
I don't care how good you
if
play.
Josh won every WPA tournament through the year, there's no way that the Mosconi Cup team captain picks him as a wild card. So, you have to play in Matchroom events to get into Mosconi Cup. Now, is Josh going to play in Mosconi Cup this year? I don't know. I mean, we know
that. Don't give me. I don't know, Mike. Don't give me. I don't know.
I don't know for sure. I think if I was going to bet
right now,
if I was going to bet right now, I'd say he probably would, only because Ralph's German coach. It's not going to reflect well with the German Federation if he snubs Josh to pick Kachi or something like that, right? At the same token, there going to be anybody whispering in Ralph's ear before he makes his picks. Who knows? Like you. I mean, you and Ralph are like this. Come on.
Listen. Ralph was the highlight of the U.S. Open for me.
Well, man. Ralph's a good guy to talk to about this right now, because Ralph's got a lot. Ralph's really sitting in an interesting spot right now between picking someone like Josh, between his coaching duties with the German National Federation and working for Matchroom, all that kind of stuff. It's going to be interesting to see what he's heard. But we already know that Jason Shaw is one of the picks for Team Europe, right? One of the wild cards. So if he doesn't make the points, so there's one spot left. Okay, you got maybe there's more than one spot left.
Easy there.
I could be wrong.
Easy, Mike. Easy. It's too early in the week to drop.
I know. I was like, I kind of stepped into one there.
Oh yeah. No, listen. I think that Ralph came into this thinking that he got a real easy gig. Got a real cherry gig. You got a good chance at making a cool 60,000. I think, right? Goes to the winning captain, right? You can have a feel, just your choice of the who's who of monsters, and then you have all this just kind of fall onto your plate unknowingly, and it's very. If I'm part of Team USA, I'm loving all this Europe drama, because all this uncertainty is just going to be weighing in here, and who knows the team that's going to be out there come this December. I would say that if I were to, just given how everything's looking right now, I'd probably go against what Mike said, and that I would not. And if you were to ask me a week ago whether I thought Josh was going to make the Mosconi Cup, I would have bet the house on it. This week, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure at all, and I would be surprised.
He certainly didn't make any friends in this past week. In Mosconi circles and in Matchroom circles, no doubt about it. Now, how personal does it get? That's what we got to wait and find out.
Well, but you got to, Matt, listen, as great as Josh is, right? And he is great. He's in that like Shane kind of category, as far as player goes. But it's kind of interesting because we don't have this kind of like love-hate relationship with Josh unless you're on the Mosconi Cup, right? Like you don't feel the way you do as a fan for him without all those December performances, one way or the other.
No doubt about it.
You know what I mean? So like
it's a career maker.
There's 4 players. When I think Mosconi Cup, there's 4 players: Shane, Sky, Jason, Josh. Those are the staples of the Mosconi Cup. And outside of them, there's supporting cast, there's other people, but those are the stories right there. Like Shane's performance in past Mosconi Cups, and, Sky kind of being that leader of Team USA, and then Jason and Josh holding it down for Team Europe. And then whoever you put around those guys, that's the core. That's the core of the Mosconi Cup. So if we don't have that now, what a shame. And not just that, Josh in any Matchroom event, right? Every Matchroom event he's in, we're picking him. One of us is picking him to win the event. And usually it's Panozzo. He calls him Joshy. But Panozzo's picking him to win the event.
Josh tattoo on his chest.
Imagine we go through a whole year.
Got Josh here and Pia here.
We go through a whole year of the World Nine Ball Tour without a Josh Filler. Like, I can't even fathom that.
Well,
It's
that's
crazy.
that's the thing. You look at impact it's going to have on pool in general, right? So there's two ways to look at it. If there's a WPA tour and there's a Matchroom tour and players are split, more players are going to make more money. Actually,
True.
there's going to be more players
Right.
with a bigger bankroll because no one's going. So
But
that's the
only
one
one
side.
of them has a
That's,
tour right now, Panozzo. Let's just be real.
yeah,
There's
but
only
I'm
one
saying
tour.
it's saying a series of events. Okay,
Who's gonna
so
make you a star, Mike? Who's gonna make you a star
there's
along
no
with them?
doubt. There's no doubt. I mean, we listen. They just had the Qatar Open, $50,000 first prize. It was, from a visibility standpoint, it was a shambles. Other than us sharing a video of some faces on a building, which was really cool, the visibility angle was a shambles. It was, you didn't know where to find it, couldn't find any brackets, couldn't find any scores. If Windows Open wasn't posting stuff every day, no one would know that event even took place. Okay, and this is par for the course for the WPA. They can
But
sanction
to
all
be
the events they
fair
want.
though,
They can,
to be fair,
yeah.
it's still worlds better than what it's ever been before with them. Like it
Well,
as
before it was like having a bar table 8-ball tournament in somebody's basement. It was, it was beyond horrible. But
shots
and
fired. Shots fired.
well, it was, and so this is, the WPA. I don't know. Let's not get into all this because they talk about all their, what they bring as a sanctioning body and
The authority.
overseeing things and the authority and making sure that the prize money's there, which was not the case in years past for the WPA. They would constantly, put their imprimatur on an event, and then the money would dry up before the event started, and they were left, looking like with egg on their face. So, they say all this kind of thing, but they don't have any impact on making the events bigger, making them better, making them more visible, growing the sport. Like I said, the event in Qatar, it was better than it's ever been, but still, I mean, not even in the same zip code as
You
a
mentioned
national
you
event.
mentioned the money. Let's talk about the money because the press release mentions that there's $5 million annual prize funds for men and women, right? So, and then we also talked about the events, and I said there's really only one tour, but you talked about that there's a series of events. How many events are we talking about? I think I saw you post something on that, Molina. How many
Well,
WPA
yeah,
events versus how many Matchroom events?
Yeah, I posted some just from what you can get from the WPA website, but yeah, I mean, let's just take a look at a few of them and that breakdown, guys. So this is 2023 prize funds for the WPA. They're gonna sit on this number here, and like this is what we talked about when we had, I think it was David on for the first time when he talked about the 4.6, and then we talked to Ishan, and he mentioned that you can expect that number to increase. But it's a little bit misleading because you look at this 4.6 and you got events that we expect not to be there next year in the Wisconsin Open and the Michigan Open. You have women's events included in that as well, including the Women's World Nine Ball.
got a $1.5 million hay ball event in there.
1.5 million in hayball. You got the women's 14.1. You got a black ball in there as well. So it's kind of there's a little bit more fluff in that number that when you're comparing.
It's not really fluff. What it is it's the apples and oranges argument.
Exactly,
When
yeah.
they were making the argument about it being 4.6 million, they were trying to belittle Matchroom's 3 million, right?
Right.
That's what the whole point of that was.
Of
So
course.
that's the apples and arguments, is that, okay, let's strip all the hay ball women's events out of there, and it comes down to under the Matchroom
About half.
number. It
Yeah,
comes
about
out to half, which is under the Matchroom number, right? So, as far as we're the land of more opportunity,
Are you?
that's debatable. Yeah, not for the men, it's not.
What do you mean? Oh, yeah.
For
Well,
the
I mean,
men,
because you're under that three number that
correct.
I would expect that number to grow. And if I remember, well, I won't even go into that, but it's just pretty interesting how all this seems to kind of to break down when you look at it.
Yeah, it's
It's definitely not apples to apples for the 5 million.
that's for sure. Not even
Yeah,
close.
yeah.
So
I
we'll see
saw
if we
a
look at what's in there for next year. What Josh, if he goes WPA, what the WPA players have to look forward to next year is Las Vegas. We can, we'll make an assumption on China and Qatar, although both of them, you know, this year was the first year they've been around a while, so there's
Right.
no guarantees on them, but we'll throw them in the mix.
Well, but you also have
You got the
to
World Eight Ball and the World Eight Ball,
yeah.
right? And so you've got World 10 Ball, World Eight Ball, and these a couple other China Open, Qatar Open, whatever. So.
You got to keep in mind though, Mike, like that ability to maximize your earning potential on a trip decreases significantly
Yes.
if you're going to be handcuffed to strictly WPA events. Because while I'm here in the U.S. playing the Las Vegas 10 ball and and the Diamond event or the Apex event, whatever the hell they want to call it, next year, I might want to stop by Griff's and play in their 8 ball event they got going on that's got $20,000 added. Or I may want to stop by in Connecticut and play Jason's event that's got another $15,000 added.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, at least I would think based off of that press release, I'm not gonna have that ability to do it because I'm only gonna have to play within those walls.
Right. I mean, it makes a lot of sense here in the U.S. In Europe, not as much. I mean, because there's no place. It's always rankled me that Europe has this power and loves their structure and building the sport, whatever, and they can't rub two nickels together to make a dime worth of a tournament over there. So there are no other tournaments going on when you're in Europe. There are no big tournaments when you're in Europe. I mean, unless Matchroom or Predator runs them, there's nothing in Europe. Never has been. So that's paper tiger. Asia, everybody wants to go to Asia and play in events over there. There's probably a little more action over there than there. But yeah, the U.S. is still where any player, European or Asian, wants to go, where they know they can stick around for a while and play in a bunch of events. And that's not going to be the case if they're found at WPA.
Telfer makes an interesting comment in there. Do Predator not drop the WPA in order to ensure that top guys can play their events? I've heard rumors that there's issue between the WPA and Predator. So what happens if that comes out to be true? Because if Predator does distance themselves from the WPA, then what happens to all their world team events and their world 8 ball and their world 10 ball events, right? All of these things that if the PBS goes away, right? So then these are going to be their only crown jewels. Are going to be these big world championships that they bought, So then what happens if then they disassociate with the WPA?
Well, that would
be a problem. It's going to be a problem, and it'd be a problem for funding, I would imagine.
Not for funding. WPA ain't adding anything to that pot.
No, but Predator is.
Yeah, but how would disassociating themselves be an issue for funding?
I thought you said if Predator disassociates from WPA.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
but
so they don't sanction their event. They still run. Well, they for one, they wouldn't run. They couldn't run the World 8 ball. And they couldn't run the World 10 ball.
Yeah, we saw that years ago with Charlie Williams.
Those are owned by the WPA, right?
Yeah, when Charlie Williams tried to do a world straight pool and WPA shut it down. Remember?
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be called the World 10 ball or World 8 ball.
The bigger question is what happens to the World 9 ball, which Matchroom owns.
What is going to happen to the World 9 ball, Mike? Because that contract, from what I understand, is pretty rock solid. But part of that agreement is that it's a WPA sanctioned event that Matchroom puts on.
So, so what happens? Does Matchroom sanction it through the WPA? I can't imagine how they could, because if they do, the one thing that's in the contract, I would believe it's in the WPA's favor, is that it's WPA has to okay the players list. I mean, they may not have all the allocation, but if you're barred, banned, suspended by the WPA, you can't play in a WPA event. You can't get
so then hypothetically you would not have Sky Woodward
exception.
Right. So hypothetically, if let's say the Shane and Sky, we'll just use them as an example, right? Let's say that they're playing in Matchroom events. That would mean that they're not a part of the WPA, right?
Correct.
So then, in turn, that would mean they would not be allowed to play in the WPA World Nine Ball Championship,
Correct. Correct.
right?
Same with anybody who plays in a Matchroom event, right? So is Matchroom going to hold an event that their players can't play in? Doubtful, right? So, and I think really WPA would love for all this to allow them to get that tournament back. Tournament that Ian sold them out on, they would love to get that back in their portfolio and shop it around with the World 8 Ball and the World 10 Ball, right? So people talk
But then,
about
why would those companies
Matchroom
want to give that
starting
up,
to,
Mike? If they bought it, I would
because you can't
probably.
run it. You can't run it contractually and stay within your contractual obligation. If you're allowing
God,
suspended WPA players to
what a
play,
mess.
you can't do it, right?
You know what
So
I would do just to spite them, Mike? I would do everything in my power to make sure I drag my feet as long as possible, not to give them the satisfaction of getting that event back, just to spite them, just to be petty.
well, yeah, I don't know.
You
I
know,
mean, everybody talks about the idea here of Matchroom should make their own world championship, and that's probably a likely scenario, which is a shame because then they don't have a defending champion, they don't have a two-time champion, they don't have a three-time champion, they
The
don't have the
history.
2010 champion.
Yeah.
They lose all the history that went with that event, right? So you're starting from scratch with a new world championship, and now we're going to go back to the days of pool having two world 9-ball champions in the same year, which used to drive me nuts. So I'm not sure what the way is around that, but it's they maybe just call it the global championship.
So going back I guess
Intergalactic.
about a month ago when this story first started dropping and Molina was kind of going off online about it, I was trying to give the WPA the benefit of the doubt, but I think I'd like to just talk a little bit about public sentiment. I don't know if you guys have caught it today, but I've seen people posting about this that I never see post online. You see this press release in hundreds of Facebook posts talking about this. I mean, this is a really bad look for WPA because they're viewing this as a threat and they need to take a stand against this, but they are going to be seen as the ones that are banning players right now.
And
And
they should.
there's
They
really
should
no way
because
out of
that's
that for them.
no, there isn't. But like I said, I don't think the big guys like the Asian Federation and the European Federation care. Because I mean, right now they've already shown they don't care because they're putting a gun to their players' heads and saying, go ahead, test me. Go play in a Matchroom event. See how you get treated here in Poland. See how you get treated here in Germany. See what kind of favors you get, whatever it is. And so now you're going to have a bunch of players who are going to say, okay, Victor's going to go play in the Euro Tour next month. That's the saddest thing I freaking ever heard. And so he's going to play for his Polish federation and wear his Polish shirt and going to be the most unhappy guy in the arena. That's really what you want out of your federation stars, is they hate playing for you, but they have to. Who the hell wants it? I mean, I guess if you don't have a lot of conscience, it doesn't bother you, but that would bother me.
well, but I don't think that's any surprise, though, Mike. Is it? I mean, just given the way that they've ran their business for the last, even just like set history aside, just given the narrative that we've heard from these guys over the last 3 months. I don't think that they lose an ounce of sleep. A matter of fact, I think they go to bed pretty well at night, just knowing that okay, we won that battle.
Is there something other than financial support that a player like Victor Zelensky is getting from his federation that would encourage him to stay with the WPA?
Yeah,
Because
I think there is. I
I
think
look at a
there's some
player like him.
educational stuff in there.
What's that?
I think there's some money actually education wise to whether I don't know whether it's not to send them to college, but to fulfill certain requirements. They talked about. I've heard that Moritz is in the situation in Germany where he could have through the federation basically join the army, but do nothing but practice and play and whatever.
You would get like an exemption.
Get coached to become a better pool player as part of his military service, right? Paid for by the federation. So There's little weird things like that when you get into Europe and Asia. That what there's some little extra perks and stuff here. So yeah, that those are the only thing I know about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering because if a sponsor steps up and says, "Hey, Victor, we're going to give you 75,000 a year to cover all your expenses and
Gone,
to have a little bit of pocket
gone,
change," is there
gone.
anything keeping him? Is there
No,
anything keeping him to the WPA?
no,
They're
no. At
out,
that point,
son.
no. But there's not a lot of those players, European players, who have that kind of backing. They don't have that kind of funding. So, that's why they're kind of stuck. I'm interested to see what happens to the Koh brothers in Taiwan.
ACBS is a big player, Mike, and they're
ACBS came in; they had nothing to do with pool. They were strictly a snooker group, and now they've taken over,
and
and
now
they're like throwing their weight around in pool like a 300-pound gorilla. It's just, and it boggles my mind where they're coming from. The stuff that they've posted, the threats that they've made against any player, any association in a country who dabbles in somebody else's events. They talk about legal action. I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't know who
Mike,
the hell these
listen,
people are, to tell you the truth.
tell me what's the biggest what's the biggest number on here, Mike?
Hayball.
Hey,
Well, but Hayball, but ACBS has nothing
So
to do with
so why do you
Hayball. The
think the
WPA
WPA
loves
would?
Hayball.
Yeah, but why do you think? Yeah, but that's the same. It's the same one, Mike. They're in it.
Hayball's a sugar daddy.
So why do you? Well, I don't want to be crude here, but why do you think that they're accommodating them the way that they are and every decision that they make?
Accommodating who? Hayball or accommodating ACBS?
I think it's one and the same, Mike.
I don't. I don't think so. I don't think so. And we'll find out, because everybody who's been in this business long enough knows that the Chinese federations, billiard companies, whatever, if WPA accuses Matchroom of doing what they want whenever they want to do it, man, deal with China for a while, because they do whatever they want whenever they want. So,
So what's this
um,
going? So how is this going to affect? You mentioned the Koh brothers. It's going to affect Filipino players that are going to
yeah,
be
I mean,
playing.
you start taking away things like the Sea Games and the World Games and things like that. That's kind of important. I don't know. I have to find out how important that is to them financially, right? I mean, and just spiritually, everybody wants to wave their country's flag and play in an Olympics, right? The Sea Games is the Olympics for Asia, so they love to play in that stuff. The Filipino players always have, the Taiwanese players always have, but so they'd get aced out of that. How much does that mean to them financially and emotionally? That's one of the things we're going to find out.
I'd like to put out an open invitation for any pro players that are out there that want to make a stand and want to talk about this to come on this show, and we can talk about this
Good
because
luck with that.
I feel like there are going to be those players that are going to be really upset about this ruling, and they have to make a decision. And so once they make that decision, they should have a platform to speak about it.
And
Right?
we'll get
We're talking about this. We're speculating. We're saying how how we think this is messed up, but it's affecting their livelihood.
Well,
yeah.
yeah,
Right?
but this is also like after months of conversations, whether on the record or off the record, with a number of different players, because there wasn't but a few players that I stopped and talked with at the U.S. Open where this conversation didn't come up. And so it's been weighing heavily on everybody's mind from the moment I walked in the building. It was something that's just been hanging over their heads. Everybody expected this decision to come down. I don't think it's any less surprising or any less disheartening. But this is something that every player has an opinion on. It's just whether or not that they want to take that opinion public. But by where they choose to play will be the first in many decisions that they can make, whether publicly or otherwise. Because, like I said, with Shane goes and cancels Qatar and goes plays over there, I think that's a statement. You have Josh canceling out Hanoi after winning a WPA event. I think that's a statement. Just as well. Whether or not they'll come out and say that publicly is different, but like the writing is there for sure.
So we opened this show talking about it's a dark day in pool, but Telfer makes a point here about the money. Could we get into a situation where this turns out to be a net positive for pool, where it's almost like a bidding war, where you see the WPA and they're like, well, this year we put 10 million into a pool, and Matchroom's up in their ante, and first prize
anything
is
that
now paying
splits the
100.
players up, anything that splits the players into two camps is not good. Was golf any better? I mean, golfers made a lot more money this year than last year overall. If you look top to bottom, was
I
it better
don't
for
know
golf?
I don't know that that's true though, Mike,
There were so many
because
guys on the Live Tour making money that they would have never made if they were on
Yeah.
the PGA.
no, I understand, but I mean, wasn't that good?
They all made more money, but they didn't. Was the game better? No, I mean, I want to see the top players all playing the same place.
Yeah, but I mean, like I remember
I don't want
years
to see
ago, what
Josh
was it?
playing here, and
I don't want to
Years
see
ago.
two diluted products. I want to see
Me
like
either.
the
Me
absolute
either.
cream
But
battle it out.
thinking long game, not thinking right now, but thinking long game. Look what happened with who was it? The USFL and Herschel Walker when he first came
Yeah.
out. Wasn't it him that went to the USFL? And so you had a competitor to the NFL. I'm sure that had an impact on salaries in the NFL, right? Because the number one player coming out of college ends up signing with the USFL, right? So could this have a net positive impact in
Yeah,
5
but
or 10 years?
the difference is he was compensated for that decision. He wasn't strong armed into making that decision. There's a very big difference there. And like Mike pointed out when we brought up that graphic
Well,
showing those
hold on.
events, we don't know that China and Qatar are pretty big numbers on that graphic we had earlier. Who's to say they won't disappear again like they did for 5 years?
I'm playing devil's advocate, but let's say the two sides now are vying for what players are going to play for them. We could get into a scenario where it's like, hey, next year, like WPA, I would have to think that part of this General Assembly was not just making this ruling, but talking about how they have to come strong next year so that they could, in this grace period now, this interim period where players have to decide,
But they're not the ones adding the money though at all on any event.
What's that?
WPA isn't the one adding any money to anything.
Not. Of course not.
They don't bring a dime to an event.
No. But I mean, they could promote it. They could get
that friend that wants to drink all the beer, but they show up
get
empty-handed.
people to put money
They
up.
could promote it.
Like, they're going to have to put up.
You're talking about the worst promoters in the history of the sport.
We're in a position now where players are going to make a decision, and they're going to pick what's going to be best for them. And so I'm saying there could be a scenario where WPA right now in these next 6 months or so is like, hey, we need to come big with a big calendar of events next year. It needs to be a lot of added money. And Matchroom in kind may be saying the same thing. Like, we got to go even bigger next year. We know that's probably already in their plans, but now it might be even more in their plans. Like, hey, we got to make sure the winners, instead of getting 40, 50,000, are getting like 80, 90, 100,000.
How many of those players that played in Qatar do you think we will see on the Matchroom stage in 6 months from now?
Not many, unfortunately.
Carlo, the Polish, the Cole brothers, Josh. How many of those big players do you think we're going to see on a Matchroom stage in a few months?
I'm concerned we won't see many of them at all.
We should have a show where we take the list and go A or B. See how.
Yeah, we'll do a fantasy draft for that.
Yeah, we're laughing, but it's
sad.
It is, man. It's sad for the players because it's already, like I mentioned before, man, it's already tough enough for them to make any kind of money with travel expenses and the cost of everything. They're going from tournament to tournament, gambling on themselves with a bunch of uncertainty. You got to fade the toughest players on the world, jet lag, hotel rooms, everything.
Look at this, Mike. When we talked about how it was starting to get the feel of like a real geographically, given a lot of geographical thought about how the tournaments were playing out with the Connecticut event, the New York event, and then now if you look at that WPA list of events that you put up, I mean, you're bouncing all over the world: Qatar, Las Vegas, Maldives. I mean, it's
some of them we don't expect.
That's going to be even more expensive
either, because when I went on the WPA website, I think I counted like something like 15 events on there, and I think you're going to lose a pretty big chunk of those, just what we expect in the next few months. So
we should start a GoFundMe for Victor to play in Matchroom. Who in the chat's behind that? Who wants to see Victor in Matchroom events?
He's a great player with a ton of upside. I think a lot of people like his chances to
Heck
win a
yeah,
big
we want to
event.
see
You know,
him.
outside of like a Pro Beard Series event, like to win a big world championship. You know,
I mean,
and
he's
it's
been
real.
knocking on the door of a lot of events, but just not pushing through. So I'd love to
Well,
see him.
he's won events, just not
Predator events. Yeah,
just not Matchroom events.
right.
You know,
Won
but
the
we've
WPA
seen
event.
it's a big one, Mike. It's a major, according to you, huh?
Predator
All right,
Michigan Open.
so where do we go from here, boys? Because the Hanoi Open is going to start in a couple of days. The end of the Perry event.
Found puppy back to the backyard.
Sorry, my daughter found a puppy in the backyard.
What does she think about the WPA?
I love it.
Puppy,
The hell with the WPA and the players,
the
boys.
puppy's lost.
My daughter found a puppy. Okay, I'll be right
There you
there.
go.
All right. Okay, love you, babe. You know, but it's where are we going from here, boys? What do you think the Matchroom response is going to be in the next few weeks?
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting because they've got Hanoi coming up, and they lost a lot of players, Asian players, to the threat, just by threat, not even by the actual ban, just by the
Yeah.
threat of retaliation. They lost 60, 70 players, right? And then they lost Josh.
Probably the best player in Vietnam didn't go to Vietnam. It's
right.
crazy.
So they're
And it's not even just that, Joe, because I've been in contact with Huang's manager, and he said that there's been a lot of backlash from fans in Vietnam by his decision not to play, even though it really wasn't his choice. You know, which is real sad when I heard that. I mean, just broke my heart, man.
So I think Matchroom will just continue its schedule as it's going and fill it up with the players who are here, and they're going to out promote the shit out of the WPA, right? So their players are going to get more visibility, and I don't know. We get some new winners. We get some whatever. Jim says Matchroom's going to announce World Championship in 24 is March 2nd. That would be here's the funny thing. The
Listen,
World
I'd
10
love
ball.
that.
The World 10 ball is supposed to run into the first couple of days of March.
Panozzo, I thought you saw the comment where we found a puppy live on Dogging It. I'm wondering.
We should
here's
name
one
it.
thing.
Okay, who's going to come up with the name for the puppy?
Matchroom has teased this Reyes Cup idea now for a few years. And
no bullshit. She's only come out, and I've been pushing that event for so long, despite Mike saying hell no. And then they finally said, okay, it's a great idea, and we're interested in doing it.
Yes. Okay, so I'm sorry. Matchroom is not the promoter. Matchroom Mike is the promoter.
No, I'm not saying I'm the promoter, but I'm just saying, look, you saying they've been pushing it for a few years. They haven't. She barely came out this year.
They've been talking about it.
It's been at least 2 years. And maybe
at least 3
maybe
years.
it was your idea.
Bullshit.
At least
Go
3
watch
years
the
where
show.
they said it's going to be inevitable. They've said it's
Sorry,
inevitable
I didn't
for at least 3 years.
Sorry, I didn't
when you were
source it.
on a break, Joe.
Sorry, I didn't source it that it was your idea, Mike. But they've been talking about it. Can we agree they've been talking about it? Okay,
Yes,
fine.
yes.
Does this push the timetable for that event? Because think about
If it pushes it anyway, it pushes it back.
Why?
Because now all of a sudden you go down there, no co. The Filipinos.
What if it pushes it forward? What if it pushes it forward? Because those Asian players that might be inclined to choose WPA now see that, wait a minute, we could get points and earn our way onto a Asian team to play against the winner of the Mosconi Cup or Europe or however they're going to do it.
Yeah. Huh.
Thanks, Panozzo. I was on the edge of my seat waiting for your answer, and you're like, okay.
No, I got sidetracked again. I'm old. I get distracted, and then that's it. My mind's just completely
stop
fried.
replying to Jim Telfer in the chat. Okay.
No, Mike's the one who's getting the text messages from people all over the world who want to sneak something in there.
Well, one thing I know about Matchroom, it seems like they don't like to be upstaged, and I could see a big announcement coming in the next couple weeks.
Would you jump the gun on a Reyes Cup, wondering whether you're going to have a second one because come March, those Asian players are all going to have to make a choice?
Well,
No,
that's
because
what I'm
then you're
saying. That could
because
be
then
the
you're
thing. That could be the thing that could help them make that choice to go with Matchroom as opposed to the WPA. And even if they don't
Well,
have, think about it, even if they don't have the top tier stars like the Beatos and the Coes and people like that, there's so many great players in Asia.
yeah,
That could be the next. That could be the next stars. That could be on a team of
that's
5.
possible. But what aren't we speculating that Josh will go to WPA? Is that what your speculation is, Mike?
I'm saying,
Josh will end up WPA.
yeah,
wait.
Okay,
You're
seems like it.
so he's not having a problem turning down 40,000 a year
what? It
Well,
because
sounds a lot.
he
to me,
gets
it's
that out of
more.
Mosconi, right?
Yeah, to me, it's more than just the money of
If
making the money, right? I'm
You never
sure.
know. Listen, Josh is a great player, but we know Josh, and like I said at the start of the show, we know him because of the Matchroom stage. We know him because of the winning the U.S. Open when Matchroom bought it. You know him because of the Mosconi Cups that he's been on that are under the Matchroom umbrella. Like I get you have loyalty to your federation and all, but don't forget who made you a global superstar because it ain't the WPA, son. I hate to break your heart. You know, Matchroom was a really big part of that. I mean, his game was everything to that, but it's also being on that stage that is what got you that global fanfare.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It's more than just the money. Look at the production of the Mosconi Cup and look at what that draws in. All year we point towards that event, and if Asia had a similar event that they could point to all year that had the production value, okay. When players get off the plane in Asia, they meet them with flowers. There's all these fans behind Federer at the event cheering and screaming. They just treat pool differently in Asia with a lot more respect, with a lot more support. I've talked to pro players that have gone over there and they're like, man, we're treated like movie stars over there. And so this would even enhance that for them to have a playing field like the Mosconi Cup in Asia. And it would be more than just about the money. And it could help sway players to choose Matchroom, I believe.
Well,
Interesting.
you're already starting to see some Asian players that are already choosing that side. I mean, you're seeing some on both sides because then you have the Chuas and the and James and all these Filipino players who are over there in Vietnam despite the threats, right? And then you have along with Taiwanese players in Vietnam despite the threats, right? But then you also have players that with those threats they decided to go to Qatar. And I don't think they would have been there otherwise because I don't believe at least the Koch brothers would have been in Qatar otherwise. Huang for sure would not have been in Qatar if it wasn't for those threats made by the ACBS.
It seemed like a lot of the Filipinos chose Vietnam compared to some of the other countries.
Well, Carlo is
Remember,
interesting because Carlo has won.
Carlo was
Number one, Carlo has won the SEA games many times. Along with that, I mean, he's also won a lot of WPA events. So he's a bit different for me anyway. You know,
yeah.
but
Let me ask you this. Let me throw one out there.
no, here we go. Here we go.
How much is Matchroom to blame for what we're talking about today?
What kind of scale are we using here, Mike? Like a 1 to 10?
Okay, are they partly to blame for
Of
where we're at
course,
today?
of
And if so,
course.
why and how could it
Of
have been avoided?
course, Mike. I mean, there's a lot of like people can be. Look, we'll put this up. That graphic that we had up to start the show, right? Uh, whenever the WPA sent out their press release, they had a real telling and interesting paragraph, and I'm going to bring it up right now for you guys to be able to check it out. But I think it's number 3 on here, and you guys can. I'll read it. The assembly did hear a report regarding a last attempt to a possible solution, and to continue communication with promotion on the matter at hand, but the answer was a simple no. That left the assembly with no other alternative than to discuss how to best move forward with the current situation. So that to me tells me, Mike, that I'm guessing that at some point uh, in the last week or so that they got to a table and they couldn't agree to anything. Is that
Well,
fair?
I mean, no, he's referring to one of the WPA board members, which we know was our BCA representative, stopped at the U.S. Open
Right.
and talked to Emily, and and just wanted to broach the topic of, is there any interest or consideration to sitting down at the table again and revisiting this? And the answer was a simple no. We're just really not interested. So I'm not, I'm not saying that she's right or wrong. That's her decision. That's a business decision.
Of course.
I'm thinking that if she had to see what happened today, she had to see that coming. So either they've got a plan in place, or someone's just being, or both sides are just being stubborn. I do believe that there's, I talked to Jorgen Sandman at WPA. He said the door is always open to discussions. As I said, can something happen between now and March that would avoid this from being imposed? And he said, of course.
I think we all hope that something happens in the next 5 months.
And so here's the thing. Here's the thing. So this all started with Matchroom wanting its 9-ball rankings to be the official rankings of the WPA, which WPA balked at for a bunch of different reasons, based on the contract that they were presented, according to them. So it just seems it just seems to me that it can't be that far apart if that's the sticking point, right? To saying, okay, if you're talking about sanctioning of, $3 million at 2% or whatever WPA would agree to, and Jorgen insisted that they offered them, give us a penny per event, but it's about the power and the control of the product. I don't blame Matchroom for wanting to control their product, because it's all their skin in the game, and the WPA doesn't put any skin in the game. Okay,
of course,
so I understand that part, but don't you want to ensure the best product? If that's what you're building, if that's what you're sinking all your company money into developing of this product,
if you're Matchroom, right? Is that what you're saying?
You want it to be the best product you can get. So if you know that all of a sudden you're going to have a lot of these players running scared because they got guns put to their head.
Well, how big of a deal is it?
Try to figure out, WPA. I don't know. It's a matter of power structure to me.
You've put a lot of money into that European Open, Mike, which is in Germany, right? How big of a hit would it be not to have the biggest star in Germany out there playing in it? You don't think it's a big deal?
I agree, it's a big deal. I'm just saying, it's hard to believe that this couldn't have been avoided really simply. So
what do you think is the reason why this happened then, Mike? You've been around a long time. You know a lot of these players for a long time.
Well, I think that Matchroom wants control of its product top to bottom, and that's 9-ball pool, which if Jeremy Jones calls it 9-ball pool on TV once more time, I'm going to go nuts. But
boy, tell him, Mike. Tell him.
So
screw it back, right? Screw the cue ball back.
They want this 9-ball tour. They want something that they can market and promote and brand and whatever. I get that. Okay, is it that big a deal that the WPA 9-ball rankings would be different than yours? Because you have the Qatar Open in there and the China Open in there, and maybe you can get those, as part of the Matchroom tour at some point, anyways. But is it that big a deal?
Well, it's a negotiation. So they sit down for a negotiation, and Matchroom's like, "Hey, you could sanction our events. We'll give you your fee. All we ask is that you accept our rankings." I mean, to me, that's a negotiation.
I don't think that's on the table anymore.
Well, no, but initially. But to answer your question, is Matchroom to blame? Here's the problem. They are to blame for pushing the envelope, but they're doing things that, they're doing things. And so by doing things, in the court of public opinion, we're all like, we see the product. We see it getting better. We see it growing. We see more people watching. We see more excitement. We see more money added from Matchroom's impact over the last several years. And so are they to blame? Yeah, the same way that if us three guys put our heads together and said, we're going to make the best pro pool tour in the United States, and we're going to get all this funding, and we're going to do all this stuff, and we start doing it, and the WPA comes in and says, no, you can't do it. You need to sanction with us, or this needs to happen. And then there's this whole big divide. So that's where I see, are they to blame? Yeah, they're to blame. But they're to blame because they're pushing the envelope and they're doing something that the WPA hasn't been a part of in the last 30 years.
Well, I
right?
mean, other events were WPA sanctioned now. I think what's changed the playing field more than anything is the sheer number of tournaments.
Yeah.
And the sheer number of tournaments is what has made conflict and of dates and places and all that kind of stuff. I think that's what's caused people to say, "Wait a second, this is not fair," right? So
That's a
it's
good
not
point.
fair,
And
and it's
Jackie brings up in the chat, why is first place the same at the U.S. Open as it was back in 2005? But there's like a plethora of events now that you can play in. So yeah, we're not at a place where you're getting $500,000 for winning the U.S. Open, but there's a whole rack of tournaments. There's 3 dozen tournaments that you can play in where first place is going to pay at least 20 grand. So, I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't think the answer is having a handful of tournaments where first prize is $500,000. It's more having more options and more events to play in and make money. So we can argue that, I guess.
No,
that's the first hot take you've had in
Whew,
a year and a
I'm
half,
hot.
Joe. I can't believe.
Well, it's funny because when this issue first came up, you remember I even reached out to you, Molina, and I said, "Bro, you got to simmer down. You're like too fired up. You're calling people names. You're posting all kinds of stuff."
Well,
But
the name
now
calling stopped.
But I just wanted to wait until this decision was final. And now that the decision is final, it sucks. It sucks for pool fans. It sucks for pool players. It sucks for pool. Okay? I'm on the record.
Well,
You can quote me in Billiards Digest.
I do
that. So I did reach out to the WPA to see if they would want to come on the show. And this week, I'm not going to hold my breath, but the invitation has been sent out at least. So we will see. And if they do, hopefully it's at least, I mean, it can't get any worse than what it was last time, you would think anyway. So hopefully it's healthier and more productive, a conversation. But the opportunity is going to be there for them to be able to come on if they want to. So in the meantime, more events are going to be coming up. We got the Hanoi Open. The finish of the Perry Open is going to be tomorrow. Yeah, I don't know. We got Mosconi Cup announcements coming along with that. So
waited a long time for the announcements on those second automatic spots that we thought were pinned down in U.S. Open.
Easy, Tiger. Easy.
I'm just saying.
Hey, we need to keep a list. Let's just make a mental note. We need to keep a list as players, kind of make it public what they're going to be doing from this. I'd like to kind of update and keep kind of a record of that, so we see, like, going into next year, who all is going to be on the WPA side and who all is going to be on the Matchroom side. I think that would be pretty valuable to take a look at, and also lead to a lot of cool conversations and speculation.
Well, it's also going to affect how companies sponsor players. You see that comment in there from Kyle Nolan, but what value they get out of players who are only going to be playing in WPA events versus Matchroom events makes a big difference. The exposure and amount of eyes that are going to be on those players is going to be weighted a lot differently than what it would have a year ago. So, yeah, I think it's only the beginning of big news that's on the horizon. So, as tough a day as this has been, I think that just keep your notifications on, because it's going to be an interesting few weeks in the pool world. So,
yeah.
You guys got anything else before we get out of here?
Just want to remind people, if you guys want to support us, you want to support this show, as always, you can share and like and comment. We appreciate everything. But also you can check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/doggingit. We put up exclusive content on there. You guys can check it out. Sometimes we speak a little more freely on there, and we can get into things. Molina curses a lot. It's great. You'll love it. So
you two are always the one trying to muzzle me more than anyone.
Just, somebody's
got to
babysit you.
Yeah, that's true. What were you going to say, Mike?
No, nothing. I was saying, you talk more freely than you did today.
Well,
yes.
I've been taking it easy over the last few weeks. I've been taking your guys' advice to heart. Just trying to present it a little more, just minus the
Professionally?
a-holes. Look, I was never that guy. I'm never going to be that guy. This is why I love our balance that three of us bring to the show. So it's part of the yin and the yang of it all. But at the end of the day, look, we love watching pool, and I don't think any of us want to see a diluted product from anyone. I think that, or at least we're hopeful that some kind of agreement is reached over the next few months once everyone kind of gets back home and the realization of what's coming kind of settles in, and as players start to make decisions. We hope that you guys, or that they figure something out, because it's so great when we get to have a Federer versus Ko Ping Chung final at a U.S. Open, right? It's great when you get to have a Federer versus Ko Ping Chung final in an event, right? We want the most eyes that we can see on those events. It's a great sport, man. It's a great game,
Yeah.
and it's such a great time, but it's also a very difficult time right now. So,
Yeah.
anyway, I got to run because I got to take the girls to a concert, and I may or may not have a new dog that I have to go find out about. So,
All
uh,
right, guys.
anyway, we appreciate everyone for tuning
Yeah.
in. We'll be live soon, and yeah, we'll see you guys later.
Don't dog it.